Noon Sunday, and the end of what's been referred to as the most racially segregated hour of the week in the United States.
In 1965, this groundbreaking WSAZ TV news documentary on race relations focused on a major societal change, the integration of the Methodist Church in West Virginia.
The blacks and whites in a church in Huntington were one of the first in the state, if not in the nation. And so we thought it was important to cover. I confess to you, I didn't realize until later that a lot of folks weren't doing those kinds of stories.
Integration as a whole was an issue WSAZ could not ignore.
It's strange because we've never had a huge African-American population, but we did have significant events, the White Pantry and Bailey's Cafeteria, the integration of those restaurants.
We prided ourselves in doing a documentary once a month.
But These, My Brethren was unique, in a church-going region examining the historic rift between black and white and how one denomination was determined to heal it. Sheila Gray, WSAZ News Channel 3, reporting.
We've never had a huge...
Our members, the members of Ebenezer, have never really been involved in the total life of the Methodist Church. And now the Methodist Church will be right here at their very front door.
My reaction has been, well, sort of late getting here, better now than never. And if I'm a true Christian and I accept Jesus Christ as my Savior, well, I don't have any real problem with it.
What we're talking about, though, within the Methodist Conference is a structural integration. Does this actually get down to the local congregation, Reverend Coleman?
Well, we hope it will in time. Of course, all along, since the unification in 1939, we have had equal representation on all the boards and agencies of the Methodist Church. Of course, I don't know how much this has done to aid or further the process of integration. But I do think now this has come from the national level to a conference level. It will have great bearing on the local church because more people will see the Negro as a part of the church.
Include color. Well, the church member, if he is in a community where there are no Negro citizens, will probably not find very much difference. But in places where there are Negroes situated, we expect very soon that they will begin attending and become members of these white churches. This is already effective in certain communities in West Virginia even now.
With Negro and white ministers now working in the same conference, is it possible that a Negro minister could be assigned to what has been a basically white congregation?
I would say that it is our hope that this can be done in the relatively near future. We will make no changes this year. As a matter of fact, we cannot, because I'm not authorized to make these appointments until June the 13th. And in that period of time, it would be too late to make such adjustments. But it is entirely possible that within the next year or two, such assignments will be made.
I hope this will happen in the very near future. One young fella said to me the other day, a white fella, that he thinks Bishop Holloway is making a grave mistake if he does not appoint a Negro to a white conference this year. At least this will be a beginning.
Do you look forward to that with concern or with pleasure, the possibility of your going into an all-white congregation?
Well, a sort of mixed emotion, some concern naturally, and but I look forward to it with pleasure. It should be a tremendous challenge and a rich experience for both parties concerned.
How would St. Mark's accept a Negro minister if one were appointed?
Well, I think if a Negro minister were appointed to St. Mark's Church, that this would not be acceptable to the congregation now at all. And I think this would be too much of a leap without the necessary growth at the foundation and in the understanding of the people to accept at the present time.
Will they eventually come to the point where they will accept a Negro minister?
Well, I think eventually the whole situation will clarify itself so that irrespective of the racial problem or economic problem, the social problem, the time will come when the kingdom of God will become so real to people that we will not see color lines and economic lines and social lines. We'll see actually the kingdom objectives. This may be a long way off, but this I think we'll come to.
I feel that this merger is a great deal deeper than it appears on the surface.
On the surface, do you see any problems?
No, not as such. I personally have no objection to merging, but I feel that there are really deep implications. I think we've seen this in other states. I think when we start merging congregations, church groups, men of the differing races, that we're going to run into some problems that so many people don't seem to be able to foresee.
You spoke of the deeper effects of the structural integration of the Methodist Church. What are those deeper effects?
Well, I would say that the deepest one lies at the point of intermarriage. I think anyone with whom I have discussed this, and I feel that most people would agree that this is the point. I think so often of the new couple, for instance, who has moved into town, the new family. And I think if it's a Christian family, one of the first moves will be to look for a church home. And they usually visit around the different churches of their denomination. They're shopping. And if there are children involved, I think that they are looking, whether this is a conscious or subconscious consideration, for a potential husband and wife material for their children. And it's here, I think, that we reach the core, the nucleus of this problem. We do not favor intermarriage, and I don't believe the Negro does from his own statements.
You believe that merging of churches so that white and Negro are in one congregation eventually will lead to intermarriage?
I don't see how it can be avoided. I think the church, when it's at its best, is such a warm, close, intimate fellowship that it's just a perfect setting for the attraction of opposite sexes. And I just don't believe that this thing is intended by God.
Do you believe your congregation would accept a Negro minister?
No, I truly do not believe. I don't think that it has to do with accepting him. Now, I personally would not object to a Negro minister, but I think this all goes back, Mr. Johnson, to these basic instincts that are ours. I think that we segregate ourselves because of the many differences between us, and there is the difference of color. And as I said before, I think that the colored people, even within their own race, have their own interests, their own closely knit fellowships. I think that's where they'll be the happiest, and I believe that we are doing something that is going to have some very bad results.
How about in the congregation? Can your congregation worship with Negroes in the congregation and as fellow members of your church?
Well, let me say this. I do not believe that if Negroes came to our church on Sunday morning, in fact, we have had this, and I don't believe that there was any ill feeling, any not too much restlessness, but it is at the point of this fellowship of which I have spoken that we reach our problems. And this thing of intermarriage, I believe that is the most vital, important point in the whole issue.
You consider that other church activities than the Sunday morning worship are more of a concern than?
Oh, yes, yes. In fact, I think that the other activities really are the church. I think we can worship together. I think we can have the same feelings, the same emotions. But when we mingle in this close fellowship, I think that is where the harm is going to be done.
Do you think there will be a loss in membership in some of your white congregations?
It is possible that in some places there are persons who will leave the church. But the church will be stronger if only those who are convinced that this is the Christian thing to do remain in our midst. And for me, there can be no question whatsoever. If we are all equal in the sight of God, and if the church doesn't understand this and doesn't practice this, who will?
What about the geographic situation? Do you expect to merge any small Negro congregations with white congregations into one church?
Well, in some cases, yes, and in some cases, no. There are places where Negro congregations are afraid that they will lose their identity if they do merge with a white congregation. Now, I think we have to be patient with them also in understanding their problem in this particular regard. Although it is already true, for example, that the Negro church and the white church in Montgomery, West Virginia have merged, and they are now one total congregation.
Will this tend to swallow up the Negro, losing him in an all-white congregation?
Well, I think this is what the Negro sometimes fears. And I think we must be very careful at this point to make sure that the Negro is not swallowed up. Of course, let us remember, if this is a move that recognizes the place of humanity as humanity, rather than humanity as of any color, then eventually we regard everybody as the same. We lose all differentiation of color. So that when we say the Negro will be swallowed up, I would say the white man will be swallowed up. Because in this sense, all of us, you see, just simply become human beings.
I love my fellow man, and I think that my many Negro acquaintances would verify this. And I teach in an integrated school, and I believe these children know that I love them. But I think that love has so many different faces, we might say. I think we love our fellow man in so many different ways. For instance, some people we admire, we respect because of the position that they have attained in a community. I think some love is akin to pity or compassion because of those who have not gained any knowledgeable degree of recognition. And then I think some people we love just because they're our fellow men, that they're God's creation. And I'd like to say here that I think that God's creation is a fascinating thing because it's such a variety. We're all so different. And it's on this basis that we segregate ourselves. But here I think when we're drawing people into our fellowship that we need to consider whether our church is going to be the one in which this individual will feel secure, he'll feel warm, he'll become a part of the fellowship and make of himself a better Christian, and we can help him become a better Christian.
Do you believe that Negroes would have a problem finding a warm place in previously all-white congregations?
I think this goes back to this variety, to these basic differences, to this God-given instinct to segregate. No, I do not feel that he'll be happy.
With the joining of white and Methodist districts in this area, or conferences, are you going to have an overlap now of administrative personnel, and what's going to happen to them?
Well, I think in just one case will this be true. We will have a district superintendent who is now listed as the superintendent of the Charleston district of the Central Conference. He will become a superintendent in the merger which takes place in June, which means, of course, in making the plan of appointments, which we are in the process of doing, he will find a berth as a superintendent within the merged churches of West Virginia. The exact point we can't at the present moment say, but he will be regarded in equal status with all the other superintendents that we have.
What about the individual Negro? Does he want this move?
In certain cases, yes. In certain cases, no. There are persons who raise questions because they are not at all certain that the white man will give him justice in this new move. As a matter of fact, we have to admit the white man hasn't given justice to him in the past. I have the greatest sympathy for this attitude on the part of the Negroes, because I, as a white man, recognize the treatment we have given the Negro through a century of history. And if they're a little dubious about this now, I think, as a matter of fact, we ought to bow in anticipation that this dubious nature will continue until we prove our case.
Thank you, Pastor Smith. Count it a privilege as well as a pleasure to be here with you this morning, especially on this great day of merger. All throughout Methodism, this day has been sought. Many people who have gone on before us have given their lives to bring about this particular moment. And I count it a great day in my life to be able to see Methodism come together again. And I would like to say this morning that though we do not have information pertaining to its history, our church is willing and want to become a part of this inclusive church we have been talking about. We want to be a part of this one witness in one world. And we come this morning to join with you. And this morning I would like to present the following names as being members of Simpson Methodist Church. And I would like to surrender their care into the hands of this church. I thank you very much. On behalf of the Fellowship of First Methodist Church, let us welcome you into our fellowship. And we trust this shall be a great occasion for you as it is for us. Today, our First Methodist Church has moved one step further toward greatness. It has opened not only its church, but it has opened its heart and its lives in the spirit of Christian unity. It's taken us nearly 99 years to do this, but nonetheless the church has moved in this direction, in a sense of church merger, not because somebody's kneeling in or because somebody is standing in or somebody's walking on the front steps outside, but because the Spirit of God is moving in the lives of men to know that this is decent and this is right. For a long time, we've had in our church membership some of our Negro friends. And now others are coming, and this is how it must be, not only in Buchanan, but across this world. And the church must be in the thick of the battle. It must be a pioneer at this point. It must not be the last to change. It must be the first to change.
Has any opposition been voiced to you thus far?
No organized opposition. Of course, there are individual members who look on this as a very serious adjustment, but there's been far more support of the idea than against the idea.
What about Christ Church itself? How would Christ Church accept a Negro minister, let's say?
Well, of course, this is a hypothetical question, and yet it could be a very real one. I think now it would take some preparation on the part of the church to accept a Negro minister. Yet this might occur even sooner than we anticipated. I would feel that any minister ought to be accepted by the church not on the basis of whether he is white or Negro, but on his ability.
You have membership drives to bring new members into the church. Will you go out and actively recruit Negro members?
Our fishermen, who are the lay group in our church that carry this responsibility, actually have called on prospective and newcomers in the city And we've actually called on Negro homes, and they have always invited them as they would anyone else whenever they have called on such homes. Currently, none have chosen to join our church. And this is sometimes hard for us to understand.
When you do gain Negro membership, do you feel that you will lose white membership?
Well, I think realistically, you'd have to say there would be some. Probably very few, really.
What were the names of the people who didn't like Jesus? The Pharisees. And they didn't like some of the things he said. And the Pharisees were very, very important people in the church, weren't they?
What about the children themselves? If Negroes were suddenly to come into the class, would it make any difference to them, do you think?
I've never talked to them particularly about it, but they go to school with them. And to a child this age, color doesn't mean very much. It's whether the personality of the child comes through. Some children may like, and some children they might not like as much.
Have you ever had any Negro children in your Sunday school class?
No, sir.
Have you tried to recruit any?
Not actually. I haven't been to the homes of any of the Negro children. I have talked to the superintendent of the church that we merged with. And several of the children are interested in coming, and I think eventually will. But it takes time.
What do you plan to do in the meantime? Will you go to the homes?
I plan to go to some of the homes, yes, sir.
Is there any reason in particular that the children have not come to your Sunday school class?
Not that I know of, except maybe my lack of visiting the homes and the fact that we haven't personally invited each child. They might feel a little reluctance to come. Maybe they feel that they were unwelcome.
But we find it's difficult for us to really understand them, and I think they find it also difficult to understand us.
What areas do you expect difficulty in?
Well, you see, people may join your church, but again, they make their way based on ability. They make their way within the fellowship based not on race or color, but on what they are as people. And I can conceive where people of different races could join our church, and we would welcome them because we are an inclusive church. Yet, if they do not have the abilities to mingle with our own people, have the kind of educational background, the cultural background which makes them feel at home, then I think they would have some feeling of not being accepted among our membership. And of course this would be unfortunate because we would want them to feel welcome, and the first ones who come it'll probably be rougher on them because they'll blaze the way for others.
I pray that the day is going to come, and I hope that it will come very, very soon, when all of the hatred and the bigotry in the hearts of men will be completely gone. But I firmly believe that even when all this hatred and bigotry is erased, that we are still, because of these God-given instincts, we are still going to segregate. We are just made that way.
The Protestant Church has always believed in the individual responsibility of the church member. Is there room for a difference of opinion among Christians on this action, or among Methodists on this action?
Well, I can only give you an answer that I hope will not sound categorical, because I believe we have freedom to accept or reject what we think is right in the Christian faith. But I can only say, so far as I'm concerned, it seems to me that the equality of people in the eyes of God is so basic and fundamental to the Christian faith that I see little room for it to be denied by anyone. We ourselves are, according to our own doctrine, the recipients of the grace of God, which has been manifest to all mankind. In no case has man received the grace of God because he's worthy. We all acknowledge that in the sight of God, we are unworthy of the gift that has come to us in the Christian faith through Jesus Christ. Think of the problem that this caused in the early church, and what a great move it was. When the Jews, who were the first recipients of this faith, saw almost immediately that they had to include Gentiles and all people in this. And this was the first great step in the church. When they made the Christian faith non-Jewish, they made it universal. and said that persons of all blood, all races were one in the eyes of God. And for this reason, I cannot see how anybody can reject the position of the church in this matter.
Do you think with the new movement in the Methodist Church, you will realize a substantial number of Negro members?
No, I don't think we will actually realize or have a substantial number of members, Charles, because as yet they basically want to maintain their own base within their own community. Now this is because the church is the base from which they are moving in their training for the revolution in which they now are participating. And the church becomes the base for their training. You will find this true in the city of Charleston.
I think from structurally speaking, this doesn't solve the problem as far as the true integration of the Methodist Church in West Virginia is concerned. There is a more primary sort of a problem, that is, where a person sleeps or where he lives. This in large measure dictates where his children go to school, where he attends church, who his friends are. And for example, here in Huntington, the reason I think that we will remain probably cohesive in Huntington, at least for the time being, is because we live there south of the railroad tracks in the Negro ghetto, and it is a ghetto. We all live together, all strata, from the lowest economic strata to the highest, from educationally and any other way you want to make it. So as long as we have this sort of a segregation, a basic sort of a thing that we live, we're probably in large measure quite homogeneous. We live and we think a lot alike because we are sort of packed in a ghetto. And until the ministers, until the people and the establishment decide that homes ought to be sold to people on the basis of merit or want or need or ability to pay, I should say, then I think you're going to always have this sort of a problem. Anything you might do artificially on a state level or even on a Huntington district level won't solve the problem at all.